Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very next episode of The Stew, the show where we talk about meaningful pieces of media we've consumed in the past month. With all things considered, I hope you had a wonderful January. As always, if you'd like to get part of these conversations, all the links are in the descriptions, as well as my Patreon and Discord for you to check out. So let's go ahead and dive into the pieces of media that meant a lot to me in the past month. First off, I'm going to talk about an indie game known as Mouthwashing. Mouthwashing is a psychological horror game developed by Wrong Oregon and published by Critical Reflex. It follows 5 crew members of a freighter ship named the Tolpar and a mysterious crash that leaves them stranded in space. If you'd like to know a little bit more about the plot of the game, feel free to watch my previous video essay about abuse. It covers the narrative moments about the game. But to join me in this discussion to talk about the game and what it really meant to us, here is my cousin, Jacob. First question right off the bat, what do you think about mouthwashing and what did it really mean to you?
My experience with mouthwashing at first, when the day the game came out, I saw, do you know Alpha Beta Gamer? Have I shown you that account?
I think I've seen that one, yeah.
It's always like the no voice playthroughs of like indie horror or just like,
yeah, I think so, yeah,
indie games mostly, yeah. And the day the game came out, he posted a full playthrough immediately, and I was like, okay, this guy does not sleep. I didn't know that was like the first day it came out, but I was watching it and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I was like back like September 26th of 2024, right? The game is like not old at all.
Yeah.
And then 6 months later, or at least like December, November, I was telling you, I was like, why am I getting reels just constantly of fan-made mouthwashing content?
Yeah, I was
like, what is happening?
Yeah, I saw a bunch of animations, a bunch of different things. And it's like, what the heck? So I got the same exact thing.
I was completely influenced to like play it, like in the fullest definition of the term. I then said I got it. Yeah, and then I played it. It's like you play like 2 to 4 hours.
Yeah.
I think the like choices matter genre is oversaturated right now. And we need to go back to our like linear storytelling. Here's the beginning, here's the end, and this is it.
Yeah.
And this game absolutely fits that narrative.
That's a good point. That's actually a really great point. I didn't even think about that too much. I think mouthwashing for me too, it was a game that essentially I can equate it to a novel. It is written in a point where it's like showing you the past and the present, like in jumping back forth between those two things. It unraveled the story so well in such a tight and cohesive way that I was like, oh dang, this is a story. I was like, wow, like I was sat there, I was playing it, and I was like, oh wow, it was a page turner. I was like, come on, let me just get to the next part. Let me figure out what the heck happened, because it's all like you get little pieces and chunks and everything else. You're like, oh, this is interesting. But I think that's a good point, because with choices matter video games, which is so common nowadays, you don't really get a very tailored experience. And oftentimes many people will take like, oh, I didn't even get this part. Like, for example, Detroit Become Human. I see like reels and cutscenes and of that game, and I'm like,
I've never played that. Yeah.
I've never seen that. Like, who's that? I was like, who's the character? What? I don't remember that. But it's like, oh, this is a very tailored experience to you and about what they wanted to tell. And I thought that was like so well packaged. I've never played their first game. I think it's like How Fish Is Made or something. It's free on Steam, which I think that had like a cult following too. But I think this one was like, it elevated that independent developer to like a whole new level where they're telling very specific stories. So
it was absolutely like reading a novel.
Yeah. What did you think about the story?
Yeah, I'm always like drawn to like, the sci-fi, like, space themed stuff, like Outer Wilds, not Outer Worlds.
Technically both in space.
Yeah, it's true. But, again, choices matter versus a linear story game. Definitely reminded me a lot of that, and just like there might be like multiple paths to get to the end, but there's like one ending.
Yeah.
And I think that mouthwashing, the story itself, I love the way that you're like forced to go about the actions and the decisions being made in the game, because that's what happened without you realizing it. Within the first 10 minutes, it says, oh, spoiler alert, don't giant astral body in the way of your hyperspace thing, adjust to the left. And you see the button says, move the ship to the right. And you're like, okay. And then obviously that was the wrong thing to do. So it was like auto correcting, error, run. Oh my God, red lights and stuff like that. And then you had to get the button to turn off autopilot. And immediately you're like, okay, what's going on here?
Yeah.
I'm not doing this. I don't want to do this yet. But you're forced to. And then that sets up the whole rest of the game until the big reveal that it wasn't Curly.
Yeah.
It was Jimmy who did it all the way. And it all like
Jimmy.
clicks together at the very end.
Yeah.
And yeah, no. The second half of the game, it gets very artsy and like, you know, kind of like up for interpretation, how you can see like Jimmy dealing with Swansea. That whole sequence is insane. The Polly, the horse sequence was insane. That was in my opinion where the game dragged a little bit, because I was like running. Okay, I have to wait for the thing to get out of the way in pitch black. Oh, I have to shoot him. Why? Okay, he shot me. All right, let's start this again. It's just like over and over again. And as soon as I was about to give up, it like just I got it, I guess. So I was like, okay. And then it went right back to the phenomenal story, and I was like, all right, cool. He puts Curly in the cryostasis stasis chamber, and it's kind of up to everybody's interpretation of what happens next. And I like that too. I'm like, you know what? Maybe within 20 years that he will be saved or something will happen, you know?
Yeah, you don't even know. I agree with you. I think the game dragged a lot in those horror aspects where I'm just like,
yeah,
I don't want to, like, I'm not playing Amnesia or Outlast here. I'm just like, I want to know what the story is, what is happening. And that specific one with the Pony Express and the horse sounds, and I was like, this is the worst. And then also the part with like the fetus, and there's like the worm coming out and the snake or whatever with a bunch of appendages in like the hallways.
Yeah. That one I was like, I kind of just, I was like, I don't think I'm doing it right. And then I got it eventually. Yeah, I was just like, okay, I guess. Yeah. I don't know if that was intended that way or if I actually did something correct, but either way, I was just like,
I was like, how much longer would I have to go? It's like, come on. But no, I really appreciate that. And I also appreciate, again, back to like the idea that it's a tight narrative story. I think both you and I realized now that we've gotten older, we don't have that much time to play, you know, a game 15 times to see all the different endings or all that stuff. It's like, let me play one and just experience it, and then I'm done.
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
If it's really fun, I'll go back to it and just play it. But otherwise, if it's the story, like, let me just get it.
Yeah. I'm glad that I'm like not gonna be left out of like Heavy Rain. Like, why didn't you could have done this? Yeah. Why didn't you do this? And I'm like, I think that's fine. I didn't want to do it at the time, and I'm not gonna re-download like Detroit Become Human and start over the 40-hour game.
Yeah.
But yeah, this it was nice. It was tight. It had the direct like storyline and like this is exactly what happened. However, the discourse about this game could not be crazier. Like all the fans and like the community and stuff, they're still like questioning. Like a big thing I see online is like, oh, Jimmy assaulting Anya. Why was that? Why was that not shown? Is that up for debate? What really happened there? And it's like, have some like media literacy. Like you can understand things without being shown them directly, obviously. And it's like, oh, was Curly actually a good person? Like the iceberg is deep in this game, you know? It's a shallow top, but like the rest of it under the water is insane.
Yeah. Which brings me to my next point. Actually, I came up with a video essay script that I want to do about mouthwashing and also another game too. Have you ever played Silent Hill 2?
I have not, but I watched the movie that it was based. The movie was based off of Silent Hill 2. Yeah, it's with Sean Bean. It's like 2001. It's like not. It's also like not that great, but in my opinion, I saw that they just remastered it recently.
Yeah, that game I'm gonna conjoin with mouthwashing to talk about. It's not a very common thing in video games, especially in narrative video games, because I want to talk about abuse from an abuser's perspective. So there's a book that Sam and I recently stumbled upon called like, Why Does He Do That? And it's like this counselor who works with a lot of abusive men. And the way that I see it is like, you can search up like what games sort of have abusers in them. And it's like, you don't really have that many. Like, sure, in Grand Theft Auto, you can go punch a random person and whatnot.
Yeah.
But that's not like the same sort of categorical thing where classify like as abuse. But something like
Right.
in Mouthwashing, the main character Jimmy is just awful, right? He's done horrendous
Yeah.
things. He's a villain in every sense, but he views himself as the hero. And that's what I want to get across with the video is like I want to dive into when it comes to things like abuse, abusers tend to view themselves in a way that makes sense to them and makes it feel like they aren't in the wrong. So then when you talk about like, oh, the media literacy, like, do they really need to show that? You need to understand like Jimmy, you're also playing through Jimmy's perspective.
Right.
And many things that I love about Mouthwashing, it shows you like, oh, Jimmy's like, oh, Anya, you can't like, give Curly the pills. Like, what are you, a nurse? Like, you're terrible, right? And you're like, okay, one, like, Anya's like terrified of Jimmy. Two, Anya's pregnant, so now she's becoming nauseous, so she can't handle the whole thing as well. And so like Jimmy's like, oh, you're useless, blah blah blah. And then it's like, okay, but Anya's also like very shy and timid, and it's like, no, she's not really shy and timid because in the previous flashbacks, like she feels natural. She's like, oh, I'm just I'm here, like I want to be I'm really excited for
It's
this
her
mission.
response to Jimmy.
It's her response to Jimmy, and you don't know that because you're viewing it all
right.
through Jimmy's perspective. And that's what I loved about the game. I was like, oh, like this is so crazy because it's like the way that you're presented the story is through the perspective of someone who's committed this abuse, and you don't understand at first why things are the way that they are, and then it unravels to a point where, hey, Jimmy's the bad guy. And even by the end of it, when he puts Curly in the cryopod and he's like, good luck and stuff, and then he shoots himself or whatever, he's dying thinking he was the hero when the entire time he's the villain.
He's construed the story in a way that makes himself feel better about what he had to do and what he thinks was right.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I'm
in
like,
his head.
wow, what a first of all nuanced take. That's like
Absolutely.
you don't see that in video.
When was last time you played as the villain outside of Assassin's Creed 3 in the first 10 minutes, like
Oh yeah. God dang, what a moment. Yeah, that's a great addition too, because it's that idea. It's like
it's another one. You don't know you're the villain until
you don't know
you.
you're the villain until it's revealed, and then when you know it's the villain, you're like, oh crap! Like what was I doing? I was siding with them. Yeah, and I think that's a very nuanced take.
It helps the audience kind of you're like placed in his shoes, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my wait. Like 5 minutes ago, I was almost agreeing with the things that were happening, or like I was like, it was leading me to agree with these things. However, now I know that's wrong, or do I? It makes it just opens up like the other possibilities to like for just thought process and understanding the overarching story, just like a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, and I think it's a sort of storyline that I don't see a lot in video games or media in general. I think when it comes to playing as a villain, I think there's like many people who are of the mind they're like, oh, I get to play as a villain, like I'm gonna go punch your grandma in Grand Theft Auto and stuff like that. It's like it's something random, right? But when you don't know, when that sort of line is blurred, you're like, oh, I don't really know what the heck is going on. And then you realize and you're like, oh, like it challenges the way that you perceive the entire situation. And since the game is short, and I appreciate that, there's so many stacked moments where you're like, oh, wow, like Curly and Jimmy were friends. Jimmy, sort of envied Curly because he was the captain. He thought he was entitled to more because the whole like, oh, we're getting fired. Like, I wanted to be captain, all that stuff. Jimmy wants all this power. There's that scene in the Red Sea and the like ladders coming down. They're all broken. It's like the corporate ladder has been destroyed, all that stuff. And I'm just like, there's a lot of symbolism and understanding, and it changes everything you think about the game once you know.
Right.
Even
the
title of the game. Because for me, I was like, why is it called Mouthwashing? And from your perspective, why do you think the game is called Mouthwashing?
Well, at first glance, I mean, you're like, obviously, like, it's the mouthwash. And, it's the whole point of the game. But also, mouthwashing, it leads you in a direction thinking about, like, lies and, like, washing your mouth with soap, that kind of thing. The main theme of the game, taking responsibility, doing something wrong, receiving consequences for it. being cleansed, perhaps,
Yeah.
and just of the mouth, things that were being said, things being said may or may not be true, may have been said emotionally, and just trying to clean things up, holy fire, things like that. Like there was a lot of those at the end of the game, a lot of parts, very religious connotation. Curly being nailed to the wall, the Red Sea with the ladder, reminiscent of Jacob's ladder to the heavens as well, corporate ladder, things like that. So definitely, like it's very layered.
Yeah.
Title. I think that's
Yeah. And also,
I think that's great. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you really appreciate it because it's like, oh, it's like someone constructed this narrative, and it's like, this is really well thought out, and I can really think about it, and I appreciate it so much because, when I go into a story, I don't want to just leave the story and be like, oh, that was it. I want to really think about it. I want to see how like challenges my perspectives and stuff like that. But I also, with the title of Mouthwashing, besides the fact that, it's about cleaning, your hands of all this stuff, and they were transporting mouthwash, I also see the title of Mouthwashing meaning that, when you use mouthwash, you actually kill 99.9% of bacteria. That includes both good bacteria and bad bacteria. And so the point of the ship, Jimmy tries to clean his hands of the situation, and he crashes the ship, essentially killing everyone, whether they were good or bad.
Good or bad.
It was just a perfect cleanse of all of it. And that's why I was like,
yep.
Oh, I can see that too, because, mouthwashing, it doesn't discriminate against, the good ones and the bad ones. But, inherently when something bad is there, like it clears everything, even the people that you would be good, considered good.
Right. And the 0.1% escaping is Curly at the end of the game.
Yeah. And you can argue that, he was good, but probably he was pretty bad because he enabled Jimmy's, abusive behavior. And he was just like, yeah, we're pals, but I don't want you to ruin your life and all that stuff. You ruin Anya's, but that's fine. And blah, blah, blah.
The discourse around Curly too is a big topic of conversation that, like Curly knew about Anya's pregnancy, didn't really listen the first time, brought it up again before the ship crashed, kind of allowed Jimmy to, covered up some things for him, stood up for him, even just because he's his friend.
Yeah.
Regardless, Curly knew he was a bad person or not, that kind of thing. Yeah. So there's a lot of, again, very nuanced. Where the other characters like Daisuke and Swansea, you can kind of be like, you know what, they're fairly two-dimensional, I would say. Like you can see Swansea, like he's rough on the outside, but he's got a good heart. Daisuke is happy-go-lucky, younger one. Not really like a lot of negatives about either of them. Curly, Jimmy, and Anya definitely take the top three as like, wow, these guys they're molded. They are three-dimensional. They have backstory. They have flaws. They're great characters.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I also see like it depends on how you look at them too, because I think obviously you can see Mouthwashing through a capitalistic sense too, because Jimmy feels entitled to the riches and the money for working hard and stuff, and he gets fired and stuff.
And the real villain is the Pony Express at the end of the day, just for firing them, or they were going bankrupt or something, whatever the cause is. They were the ones that caused the meltdown, just pretty much at the beginning.
Yeah, and it's only exacerbated because like if they had not gotten fired, hopefully Jimmy would have seen some justice rather than all that stuff, because that had already happened.
Right.
But
right.
It's also the idea, like if you look at, first of all, like Daisuke, he's a young, happy-go-lucky sort of intern about the whole chip, and he's like, oh, I'm here to do it, here to learn all that stuff. But what I see him as is actually, since he's so naive and since he's so young and innocent, he's someone that Jimmy takes full advantage over. Meaning,
absolutely.
In the same sense that like Pony Express takes advantage over. I don't remember if Daisuke was being paid as an intern or whatever, but
right.
It's just that like Daisuke was like so happy, so go lucky that he was essentially abused in that sense by allowing so much other things happen at the expense of him. Like, even remember
taken advantage of, yeah,
taking advantage of, like, Jimmy is like, go into that vent and go do it, and Daisuke gets injured in the process and all that stuff. He's being taken
even though
advantage of.
everybody knew he'd get hurt in the vent.
Everybody
No
knew.
what.
And Jimmy was like, you're not going to say no.
Do it anyway.
Do it anyway.
Yeah.
And then with Swansea, it's kind of like a flip side, where Swansea was very much like, adamant. Like, he didn't really like Jimmy. He was like, I don't want this. I don't want this. He doesn't have a heart of gold.
Was like very retired age. Like, he was just older and just like wanted to get it over with.
He wanted to get it over with. So like, when Jimmy did certain things, he was more like, oh, stop. Like, this is annoying me, but I'm also not going to stop it because, again, like, with everything going on the ship, like, Swansea's not there all the time, but it's just that, like, and when he finally sees, like, others, like, suffering at the hands of Jimmy, like, he finally takes action and tries to attack Jimmy, but it's too late. Both Swansea and Daisuke allowed the sort of abuse to happen, and they were still like, okay, by the end of it, they both got killed and screwed over because of Jimmy's abusiveness. And in fact, the entire crew, except for Anya, you can say Anya too, but Anya's more like the biggest victim. They're all sort of allowing Jimmy to be his abusive, awful self.
Right. Yeah. And not to their fault.
No.
It's again, that's the conversation. That's many times in real life, you see your friend who's cheating on his girlfriend, you don't say anything. You see just like micro aggressions and things like that, and you're kind of just like, whatever, like, it'll be over, they'll stop it, I don't have to say anything. And it just kind of will keep going until it reaches a point in the game. It's somebody gets killed. In real life, it might be, maybe not as bad as that, but like, it will get to the point where it's like, I should have said something.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the whole point of the game is, take responsibility. I should have said something. I wish I could have, had a backbone, I guess, before something happening.
Yeah. And it's true. Like, that's the main point of the game, is taking that responsibility, because doing that is hard. It's uncomfortable, and a lot of people
absolutely
don't like being uncomfortable. It's like, I don't want to say anything, it'll pass, and then everything will be fine. And then what happens if it doesn't become fine, and in fact Jimmy crashes the ship in the asteroid, and then now all of you are screwed,
right?
So it's just that. And I really appreciate this game for that, because again, I think there's a lot of indie games out there that have great messaging, great ideas, all that stuff, but it's a wide ocean of indie games, and being able to finally play one and being like, oh, this is such a good story. I'm like, oh, like, what are all the other ones that I can think about and play and everything else like that? Because like, even like, I talked with my friend Matthew a while ago about Signalis too, that you can watch on a previous episode. But we talked about Signalis and what it meant, and it's all these like indie games that are like going so complex with their ideas and everything. It's like, oh, this is really cool. This is like challenging everything.
Yeah.
I do think narratively, Mouthwashing was a really, really good game. Lots of symbolism, really terrifying at many times.
Yeah, and it was also just like a good game to play. Like just from like a purely like video game standpoint, it was just like fun too. I was like walking around the halls, like taking everything in. I love the design of the game too. I like that animation style, and like it was kind of like, it was like Borderlands if Borderlands wasn't so cartoony.
Yeah.
I like the chunkiness and like the hard lines on the faces and stuff like that. And there's like Gary's mod things, like the models have been released, and so people like make their own like videos and stuff with the characters like moving around, which is funny. It's just like, it was just a good game too. It was like, it had things I didn't think it would have it in. It had like those sections. It had like the puzzle. It was way more of a puzzle game than I thought, and it really pushed the boundaries of what like a puzzle video game could be. I always thought it was like, it had to be something literally like Resident Evil puzzle, or like, okay, I'm figuring this out, it's a mystery game, right? I've played detective games before, but like, it's almost like it was like watching a movie that you had to like piece it together at the very end. Like, I just recently watched the Jim Carrey Absolute Mind of the this is gonna kill me.
Oh, the eternal, spotless sunshine.
Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
There you go. Yeah.
I just recently watched that, which it reminded me a lot of, like, obviously, like, other, like, Inception, Memento, like, other movies of the same genre, but, like, it reminded me a lot of Mouthwashing too, just because by the end of it, you're like, I understand the beginning now.
Yeah.
I've gotten to the very end, and now I'm like, okay, all right. That's why that was happening in the beginning. Oh boy, these people are all so bad. They definitely belong with each other. That kind of thing. Like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. I watched that movie a long time ago. I'm gonna have to rewatch it now that you said that.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I just watched it like a few weeks ago. Yeah. Also a very good movie.
Interesting. I'll just put that on the list. But yeah, about the gameplay too. Like, I think overall, like, it was a little tedious at parts because, you know, you like talk to Daisuke and he's like, where's the sweetener? I don't know. Did we, like, I think someone had it like under their sleeping bag. I'm like, okay, let me look around the sleeping bag.
And it was just right behind you.
Yeah.
And it was literally in the same room right over there.
Yeah. It was like, okay, this is not really a puzzle. This is just like go fetch things.
Yeah.
And I think, like, since it was so short and since it also had like a great story about it, I think that's what really propelled it into something that I was like, this is really good. Let me finish this. Because
I was willing to get past those, like,
yeah,
all right, let me just build the cake out and just get over with, because I want to know what happens next.
Yeah, like, I want to know what happens next. I want to know what the heck happened. It's a page turner, you know? And I think if it didn't have that, it wouldn't have been so critically received as well. And I think it, again, like, the way that they created it, which, you know, gives me like hope for games in the future and like for smaller developers, is that you can make something really, really profound and you don't need like $1 billion of budget.
Yeah.
You just
you don't need the incredible set, all the crazy graphics, like, you know, action-packed gameplay.
Yeah, you just need to have obviously a tight story and the way that you convey the story in a very specific way. Because again, there's so many moments, like, again, as you say, like with Curly and beating like the pills in there and stuff like that. Like, it's like visually, and like you hear it, it's like just shocking. And you're like, oh, it was like, what the heck am I playing, you know? But it gets you that intrigue. It's like, okay, I kind of want to keep going. And a lot of these games, a lot of horror genre things have very inventive ways of showcasing something. And that's why I appreciate horror in that sense. Not for like the jump scares, but for them taking like this really abstract concept and being like, yeah, let's put a little horror twist on it. And then so now you see how horrible something is in real life by showing you that sort of horror aspect.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So overall, I think Mouthwashing was a fantastic game. Thank you so much, Jacob, for being on the podcast. And
thank you for having me.
Of course, we will see you all in the next podcast. Whenever you decide to stop on by again, Jacob.
Peace out.
I hope you all enjoyed that conversation with my cousin Jacob. As always, the extended conversations will be available on my Patreon as extended audios for you all. The next thing I want to talk to you all about today is the Silent Hill 2 remake. Silent Hill 2 is a survival horror game that centers on James Sunderland, a widower who journeys to the town of Silent Hill after receiving a letter from his dead wife. Again, I covered many of the plot points in my previous video essay about abuse. If you'd like to go check it out, you can. Now, I have never played the original Silent Hill 2, and to be honest, I had no idea anything about the story or what it even entailed. But playing the remake this month was such a great experience. I actually really enjoyed the quality of life changes and the gameplay updates that comparison videos have shown me from the original Silent Hill 2 to the remake of Silent Hill 2. I think the developers Bloober team did an amazing job with translating the almost 24-year-old horror game into a modern classic. The game meant a lot to me because of its narrative and what it really meant. But what also meant a lot to me too was how well the game was constructed. I had a lot of doubts, as many people did when they saw the original trailer for the remake. And to be honest, I thought it was going to be boring. I never played Silent Hill 2, so I was like, maybe I'll skip out on this. But because Silent Hill 2 is reviewed as such a classic and such a masterpiece, and honestly work of art, I was like, let me go ahead and try it. Let me go ahead and play the Silent Hill 2 remake and see what it's all about. And to be honest, I was blown away by, one, the graphics. The graphical fidelity of the game was gorgeous. And the horror aspect of it was haunting. It was really chilling. I loved the audio design for the game. Holy smokes. The audio design for that game is really good. I don't think I've played a horror game in a while that has really immersed me with the sound design. And due to the nature of the narrative being so cryptic about James killing his wife, it was so crazy to sort of get those hints throughout the game and even in the sound design and through all the characters and everything. It was a wonderfully crafted video game, and I think there was a lot of love put into it. And to be honest, again, I was of the mind that it was going to be a bad game or just boring. Because I watched the original Silent Hill 2 gameplay, and again, someone who hasn't grown up with it, I look at it and I'm like, it is dated. It doesn't mean it's bad, but it is dated. But the translation to this third-person camera and everything else that they did is a wonderful addition. My favorite part is the audio design because it is so creepy. It is really intense. So much so that I did not want to play with headphones. But when I was going ahead and playing it out loud, my dog got anxious about the sounds. He was growling and barking and looking around, figuring out like what the heck are those sounds, because the sound design, the monsters make noises over here, over there, and everything else like that. So I ended up having to listen to it through headphones while I was playing, and that actually elevated the experience a lot. It made the game way more terrifying than if you were not listening with headphones. And I totally recommend headphones after playing the game. I'm like, wow, it is constructed really, really well. I will say though, my only criticism about the gameplay, it was long. I felt like it was really fleshed out and they had little variety in terms of the many locations. You'd enter a location and it would be like, you got to get the 3 things, go here, here, here. And then you would just go there, 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 and you would pick it up. Again, it is a remake of a 23, 24-year-old game. And I'm not complaining about that aspect. I mean, again, it's a dated game, but it was long. It took me like about 15 hours to beat the whole game from start to finish. And I was taking my time. I was enjoying, exploring, but wow, it felt really long, especially when you get to the hospital, then to the jail, then to the labyrinth, and it just kept moving locations. And it kind of felt like, I got a new location, let me just explore everything. So I think the gameplay loop did get a little tired. I know that the original game is not as long as the remake, which then I do think that the original has something better because it doesn't take that long to get through. I've seen many gameplays and playthroughs where it's about 7 to 8 hours, whereas the remake is about double that length. But lastly, the game meant a lot to me because it showcases a different type of protagonist that I'm not used to in video games. And honestly, even in horror games, I think a lot of horror games, aside from Mouthwashing and Silent Hill 2, which I talked about in the previous video essay, let you play as still the hero, the person who did nothing wrong and is being tormented by all the horror aspects and the villains and everything else like that. I think about mainly like Resident Evil. For example, Resident Evil 4, Leon Kennedy is going to save the president's daughter and he's going through all that and he's a good guy and there's some backstory and everything else like that. We're in Resident Evil 2 when he's a rookie cop. But at the end of the day, you look at Leon Kennedy and he's the hero. And I think Silent Hill 2 did a very wonderful thing about showing us a protagonist who wasn't the hero and wasn't the hero throughout the entirety of the game. And I love the fact that it showcased this 24 years ago. To be honest, it is such a stark and impressive narrative that considering this is a 24-year-old game, I was stunned about how well it held up over all this time and how it still resonates with so many people today. And by all means, Silent Hill 2 is a work of art. And I loved being able to experience it for the first time. And I'm shocked about how many other things have been influenced by Silent Hill 2. Because I talked about Signalis last year in September when I played the game with my friend Matthew. But now seeing it, there's so much inspiration that Signalis took from Silent Hill 2, as well as many other things that we talk about. You can check that video out too. But overall, Silent Hill 2 was an amazing game to play. I'm really shocked and I'm really happy that I got the chance to play it. The next thing I want to talk to you all about today is the game Gris. Essentially, over the course of the game, you play as the main character who has lost her voice. And over time, as the world and statue of this girl crumbles, you use your voice to put it back together after you solve a bunch of puzzles along the way. I think Holy moly, this game is beautiful. It has been on my to playlist for a very long time, and I'm finally glad that I got it off my backlog because honestly, the art of Gris is so beautiful. It is so wonderful to see. It really meant a lot to me to showcase and highlight a very inner turmoil type story where the world was crumbling around her, especially in the form of that statue, and being able to get her voice back, being able to feel like she has a voice again, allowed her to speak and to, one, fix the statue, but on another, heal herself. And I think that's what the entire premise of the game is. It is a reflective journey about one's own recovery and healing. And I really love that aspect. And I really love the game. I think it's a beautiful game. It really is so jaw-droppingly gorgeous. I will say though, the gameplay is a little bit tedious for me because the platforming and the puzzles are not too complex, but the eye candy of the game really lets you get through it all. I think that's the biggest thing that drew me into the game, and it's the biggest thing that I took away from it. It is so breathtakingly beautiful with its use of color, with its use of animation, with its use of environment. Everything about the game is so gorgeous. And again, I love that aspect that your voice can heal you. I've written a video essay about the game BioShock in the past, which you can check out, but I really talk about how we use our voices, and our voices are a tool. But when playing Gris, I think it's really wonderful how they show a voice is not only used as a tool, but as a way to heal. Because I do think that things that are really hard to deal with, such as depression and other things like that, go often unsaid, meaning that a lot of people don't voice their concerns or they don't voice their struggles or problems. And I think Gris just really tells me a story of how your voice can not only help, but it can heal. And I think it's a wonderful game that I would recommend to anyone. It is very accessible and it's very beautiful. So again, so glad to get it off my backlog because that was a game that I was wanting to play since it came out in 2018. All right, the last thing that I want to talk to you all about today is going to be a little bit random, but because this year has started off pretty rough, and I think there is a lot of stressors in the world, one thing that really made me happy throughout this time was the new Wallace and Gromit movie on Netflix. It is called Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Fowl. And to be honest, there hasn't been a good Wallace and Gromit movie in a very long time, probably about 20 years. So I have not really been a huge fan of Wallace and Gromit, primarily because I've never really watched them. But the movie Vengeance Most Fowl was a treat. Like, it was such a delight to see. It was so light and funny that it really helped me through some dark times this past month. One of the things I loved about the movie is that it was a return of the villain, Feathers McGraw. And to be honest, that villain is really menacing, but it's very cute. And I love the entire movie for its animation. I think the clay animation style of Wallace and Gromit has always been something that I really admired. I used to watch a lot of Shaun the Sheep when it was playing between episodes on Disney Channel. And it's also on Netflix, a bunch of new Shaun the Sheep stuff, but I've been diving into that too. So being able to see a full-length feature film of Wallace and Gromit was a wonderful experience. The overall premise of Wallace inventing a garden gnome to do all the yard work and start making money off of that, and seeing Gromit take the mental load as Wallace sort of lets him do all the dirty work was a wonderful plot point. And to see Feathers McGraw take control of all those gnomes and everything else like that was a really just funny and light movie. I think it's really nice to have something that's very light and very fun. And to be honest, this video and like this past month, I've played Silent Hill 2, I've played Mouthwashing, I've played Gris. These are all really tough subjects. So it's really nice to have something light for once. And honestly, I don't really have that many light things that I look forward to watching. So Wallace and Gromit really came out of the left field and really made me happy. I really love Wallace and Gromit after watching this movie. And the animation of the movie is gorgeous. There's that one scene when they are riding the boat on the canal over the large drop, and I'm like, oh, that is a beautiful shot. How the hell did they make that with claymation? Holy smokes. But besides it being light, what really meant the most to me was one of the last lines of the movie. As the whole debacle and everything happens, Wallace goes over to his dog Gromit, and after using the pat machine to smack him on the head a bunch of times, he goes ahead and he pats Gromit himself rather than letting a machine do it. Because, as he says, there are some things a machine just can't do. And to be honest, I really love that sentiment. I think since I talk about Arcane and everything else that deals with AI, I am very against AI, especially in the creative world, just because it takes away from stuff that is so fun, like making videos or doing other things. I don't want AI to make all that stuff for you. I don't want to watch slop created by AI. I want to watch stuff created by people because I want to know what they create. The most interesting part about a story is that it was created by someone and they put their soul into it. And there are some things that a machine just can't do. So that's why I love that movie so much. And definitely, if you are interested in something light, it is a very fun movie to watch. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know what you think about all the pieces of media that we talked about this episode. What do you think about Silent Hill 2, Mouthwashing, Wallace and Gromit? Thank you all, as always, for your generous support. I hope you all have a wonderful February, and I will see you all in the next video.